Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Regal podcast with me, Jordan Lewis, and my good friend Harry Cuttress. Today, we are going to be answering one of your questions about our journeys when we first started in the entrepreneurial world, as well as some tips and advice you can use if you're just starting out on the path of entrepreneurship. And first of all, let me read out this question. It's quite a big one, so we'll sort of talk through this whole question and then we'll break it down and answer each individual component. So the question, hey Jordan, love your videos. Can you do a video on YouTube about starting your own business and your experiences in the entrepreneurial life so far? How you started, what your goals are, how to make connections with other people, and so on and so on. Would be thrilled to learn from it. If you could focus on those first few days, the ones where you literally got out of bed and started making your dream a reality, what did you do? Why did you do it? What have you learned? And how can everyone else start working on their dreams? So, first of all, fantastic question. Thank you for sending it in. Now, start with the very, very first part, and I'll let you go first, Harry. Harry, what is your experience of the entrepreneurial life so far?
What's my experience? I think my experience is what anyone who's being honest, we all share the same experience, which is it's fantastic and it is soul destroying and is the best thing ever and it is the worst thing ever. And there are days when it's phenomenal, and then there are days where I want to just disappear into the woods and not return. It's a roller coaster. It's got ups and its downs. You're constantly learning new things. You're constantly coming across challenges. You're constantly making mistakes. You're constantly being humbled and realized, oh, I thought last week I'd sussed this out, and now I was God's gift. I was the expert. Turns out I might be good, but there are people out there who just dwarf me. So that's been my experience as a whole. How about yours?
Yeah, I've definitely experienced so it's similar. When I first started my business, I was quite arrogant in the sense of I thought I knew everything. I thought I was the best. I was hot shit. I knew what I was doing in terms of not just my services, which obviously I do know what I'm doing in terms of my services, but in terms of like running a business, especially running a business when I had no experience with it. Thought I knew exactly what I was doing. And then after the first week, kind of after understanding, right, okay, this is everything that goes into running a business, it's kind of like, whoa, okay, I don't know much. I need to learn. So it's definitely been a case of over the last months, even year, I've kind of been learning massively, really quickly, seen a lot of growth in my knowledge, my experience, and my confidence in running a business. And that has kind of then led into my services as a whole because as I said, I'm knowledgeable in my services, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be able to provide them. But I found that as I've grown more confident at running a business, I've then become more confident providing the services I do and actually more confident in my wider life, to be fair, doing podcasts like this, talking to friends in just general conversation and pretty much anything else that I'm doing. So yeah, it's definitely that uphill, downhill. It's a case of you don't know what you're doing half the time, and then all of a sudden, all the pieces fit together. By the end of the day, the week, the month, the year, it all comes together, and then you can sort of see this huge, fulfilling growth essentially. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Do you have anything more you wanted to add on your experiences before I move on to the next part?
No, let's jump straight in. What's the next part of the question?
Fantastic. So the next part is exactly and specifically, how did you get started in your business?
Okay, so I got started. I've got two answers actually. How I got started actually doing coaching was completely by accident, and it was simply a case of I was learning these skills. And I was learning confidence and the correct mindset to sell and to have the dating life I wanted, etc. I was able to I was learning all these skills for me, not specifically trying to teach anybody else. And the idea of coaching was not even close to my idea. I was never thinking I was going to make a business out of it. I was thinking, learn these skills, I can get a girlfriend. Learn these skills, I can maybe get a sales job, and I can go go on Wall Street and make some money or something like that. That was very much my kind of idea. And by proxy of getting results and people noticing that I was starting to become confident, I was starting to become kind of like the popular guy around the city and around town, and in clubs, people knew who I was. I started having people kind of coming over to me and going, "Hey, what's going on? Like, what's your secret? I see you here 3 times a week in this club, and you're always with different people. You're always in VIP, but I never see you spend any money. What's going on?" And I kind of just said, "Well, tell you what, like buy me a beer." Or like buy me a vodka Red Bull or whatever I was drinking at the time, and like I'll have a chat with you. And when my drink's finished, I'll kind of leave you to it. And I'm going back to my mates, and we're going to go back on a mad one. And that kind of grew into people going, "Well, hang on, if I just keep buying you drinks, will you stay?" And that became kind of me just telling them what I was doing and telling them what I had learned. And from that, it became, "Oh, well, if I just give you like 100 quid, can I meet up with you before we go clubbing and you can talk through it when I'm sober?" "Yeah, sure." "Oh, do you mind if my mate comes as well?" "Yeah, sure." And it started kind of growing and growing. And I'd never had, like I said, any intention of being a coach or having a business. Like it just wasn't something that interested me. I was still a student at this point. Um, but it just kind of, the business just kind of created itself, because it turns out I had a skill set and I had a service the market wanted. So kind of the customers found me and kind of went, "Oi, coach me," and kind of pushed me into being a coach. So that was like the literal sense of how my business started. In terms of the business as an actual business, where it's not just me kind of winging it and being a sole trader and actually having a company and doing things properly, the way that started was no small part from you, actually, which is you and I met, and we were the same kind of conversations we have on the podcast we were having at the pub 19 drinks in, and there'd be a group of friends and you and me would just go sit in the corner and have these kind of same conversations. And I realized you talked a lot about scale, and you brought up people like Craig Ballantyne, your mentor, and things like that. And I realized that, okay, fair enough, I'm making a bit of money right now and I'm becoming kind of self-sufficient, and I'm able to leave other jobs or other projects behind, and I can focus on this. But it wasn't ever going to be scalable to the point where if I stop coaching, I have no money coming in. So I was still trading time for money.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the idea of starting an actual business, coming in with products to sell and books, and I'm looking long term to bring in other people who I can kind of train to be coaches or coach to be a coach, and they can take on clients and they can help them out, and I can kind of impart the knowledge but then take a step back so I can focus more on my family and other things and other projects I've got. So the first start of that was just stress because it's the exact opposite of what I was used to doing. I was used to it being very, I don't have to think about it during the day. I just focus on what I find interesting. Oh, okay, I want to learn this skill in terms of human dynamics. So that's what I'm going to learn today, or that's what I'm going to practice. And then when it came to the nightclub, people had certain questions and I gave certain questions. Now I've had to be a lot more, okay, let's assume somebody's in the worst possible starting position. How can I strategically work out what are the foundations or the fundamental elements you need to get to where you want to go? And I've had to do a lot more kind of customer conversations to work out where specifically are your pain points, where are your sticking points, where's the point where you just can't get over this hurdle. This is the issue you're getting to. And you, for whatever reason, you just can't get through that wall or whatever it is. So it's all been a case of reverse engineering it, figuring out what are the problems people are facing, and then tailoring the advice I'm giving to that, rather than just talking about the things that I personally find most interesting. How about for you? How was your original experience of starting the business been?
So, two things I wanted to just mention quickly. So, first of all, I will also sort of give my answer in two parts for consistency's sake. And secondly, my experience of, because for you, it was almost you built the business and then had to figure out your processes after the fact. I was actually the reverse of that. And I'll get into that in a second. So, first of all, how did I kind of get the inspiration for my business? How did I fall into my industry? Mine was kind of more or less accidental, or less kind of coincidental, should I say. So for me, I was slash am a student, and at this time I was a first year student, and as you can imagine, I was not broke, but I could have done with more money, partly because I have horrific spending habits, or did have horrific spending habits anyway. Um, so I was kind of like looking for ways. I was kind of gradually getting into the entrepreneurial kind of industry niche, and kind of learning more about making money without necessarily having to work a 9 to 5 job. And this is where I kind of started learning about high income skills, so copy, closing, and speaking. And the one at that point that really spoke to me was copy. And I kind of decided, well, hey, look, I would like a bit of extra money. So why don't I just go on a freelance website? I chose Fiverr. You could use Upwork. You could use any really. I chose Fiverr and basically just started providing freelance copywriting services, and I made a fair bit of money from it. Wasn't good money based on the amount of work I was doing, just because I didn't understand pricing strategy or client acquisition or anything like that. But I made a decent amount of money, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed it. So I was kind of then like, well, let's actually invest time and effort into getting good at this skill. Because at that point, I had some basic understanding, and I was getting good results. So then I started investing in courses. I started actually taking the time to read books, articles, watch videos, listen to podcasts to improve in that skill. And then I got very, very, very good at copywriting. And after a while, I was kind of wanting more. I knew that I could do more. And a lot of my copywriting actually then delved more into the wider world of marketing anyway. So I kind of decided, well, hey, would it be a good idea for me to get into marketing? Yes, absolutely. And around the same time, this is when Harry and I were becoming good friends. And like Harry said, we were having discussions in the middle of a pub or in the middle of a night out about business, about our future plans. And also, we were getting to the point where Harry would just randomly call me in the middle of the day, and we'd have an hour-long discussion about whatever it is we might be interested in that day. Um, and that's when we kind of had these calls, and Harry was like, you know what, you're fantastic at copywriting, you're fantastic at marketing in general. Why not start a business? And this is kind of where the whole idea of, I mean, over the course of probably a few days, I would say, this is kind of where the idea of Regal, and then therefore Regal confidence, Regal marketing. Like, I know you had Regal confidence beforehand, but this kind of revival of Regal confidence, and the birth of Regal marketing and the Regal kind of empire as such was kind of born. And then that's kind of how I got into that business specifically. So actually, to be fair, that those two parts kind of merge together there, because it is kind of a straight path for me as such. But what I was talking about before, about how you were very do the business, make the money, and then figure out the systems later. I'm very much, or have been to this point anyway, very much, I'm going to basically test things, try them out, document them, create the systems as I'm going, which I would argue is good in some ways, because it means I don't have to try and think back to what I was doing and try and remember it and try and go through the pain that I'm sure you've been through of hours and hours of sitting trying to figure out what the fuck you even did, even if there wasn't some sort of tangible system. The downside to it, I would say, is that it makes progress slower, and that's purely because you have to commit that extra time to literally just documenting what you're doing. Now, does it kill your chance at success? Sorry, no, not at all. If you manage your time correctly, structure your time correctly. Um, I definitely fell into the trap when I first started my business of spending too much time just documenting and not enough time actually doing testing, trying, getting clients. But I'm reaching a point now where my focuses and my priorities are sort of in a good place now. So I'm spending time each week, each day documenting so that it's easier for the future, but it's not consuming all of my time, and it's not eating into the most important thing, which is my money now and money later activities. So that's kind of my journey and how I got into my business. Is there anything else you wanted to add quickly on that point?
Yeah, just a very quick one, which is for the person who asked this question. I'm assuming obviously you're in the situation where you're thinking of starting your own business. So as much as it might be entertaining to hear my story and Jordan's story, I think fundamentally you're looking for kind of advice and help and telling you what to do. So my kind of advice, having heard what my kind of how I started my business and having heard how Jordan started his, is do Jordan. Because I can
Do
absolutely
my
assure you this
methods,
now.
not me.
Yeah, do
Disclaimer.
Jordan's method. Yeah, don't. I mean, if you want to sleep with him, feel free. That's
I mean, I can't
up to
blame
you two
you,
to
but
decide. But no, the point I'm making is, as much as it may be a ball ache, and Jordan's correct in creating systems and creating a way of doing things and keeping documentation of what's going on, although it is time consuming, it saves you time in the long run. And especially in business, this life, and I think in life in general, it's all about sacrificing short term for the long term, in many cases at least. Something as silly as sacrificing the short term delight of having a can of Red Bull or a cigarette or a spliff or a Krispy Kreme donut or whatever for the long term benefit of better health
yeah,
or whatever it might be. And I think the same applies to business. Now, I'm not saying you should be wasting all your time and using, well, I don't have the systems in place yet, so I can't do anything, as an excuse to not actually get money in and talk to clients and start putting yourself out there. But you will hit a point, like kind of like how I did, which is you get to a point where there's only so many hours in a day. And if you don't have systems in place where the business can be making money independent of you physically being sat at the computer or being at the bar coaching, then you basically just have a 9 to 5 job.
yeah,
It's that simple. You're
absolutely.
trading time for money again, and the systems is how you escape the trading time for money algorithm. So it is one of those where there is a balancing act, but if you have to fall one way or the other, long term you'd be better off if you start Jordan's approach. Short term you'll make more money if you just go for it and then try and figure out why the fuck it worked later on. But long term you're going to get outmatched.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, obviously, this is the way I've done it, and I wouldn't change that I've done it this way at all. One kind of recommendation that I would make is when you're making systems and structures and templates, I would argue it's probably better to batch create all of your system structures and templates in, let's say, a week period. So that for that week, maybe you don't do client acquisition, maybe you don't do content, but you've got all of the systems, or at least a base starting point for those systems done. And then in every subsequent week, you will then have to spend less time actually creating the systems. And therefore, every week after that, you can spend 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, even a day on client acquisition, an hour creating content. And then you only need to spend half an hour slightly tweaking the systems based on the results you've got. And it's literally that simple. Um, that's kind of what I wish I'd done in the first place, because I did kind of trickle out my systems over a long period of time. But if you get it all done in a week, it'll be a pretty crappy week, I would argue, because it's quite boring to create systems. But once you've got them, your life will be plain sailing, or at least significantly easier. And then, therefore, you can spend more time doing the most important activities, which are money now and money later activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also gives you the added advantage of when you bring in employees and when you bring in an assistant or team members or fighter jets, as Bedros calls them, or whatever kind of word you want to use, when other people are a part of this business, once you've got systems in place, you can essentially go, here is the template, or here is the
Yeah,
system, here's what we do. You don't
yeah,
need me to babysit you. I don't need to train you. It's kind of, you do A, B, C, D. If you've got a
got
different way of doing things, let me know. We can talk about maybe tweaking the system, maybe always better, etc. But it means you kind of can leave things alone. So say content creation, say like carousels for social media marketing or some of the clients you have, you could theoretically bring in a team member tomorrow and say, here is the template, here is the systems in place we have, so crack on. For sales, you can bring in a salesperson tomorrow and say, here are the spreadsheets, here's where you get the leads, here's how the lead acquisition works, here is the pricing structure, etc. And they can just go take the ball and run, and you can
yeah,
focus then on the things that only you can do as a business owner, as the CEO, as the founder, as the whatever your term you give yourself. You
yeah,
can move in on the big picture shit
yeah,
and let somebody else focus on the day-to-day, more micro level stuff.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's 100% the ideal world. It's as the director, founder, CEO, you spend you spend almost all of your time on the 20% of things that only you can do, and then you can outsource or hire somebody to handle your client acquisition, your content, just like Harry said. And my biggest recommendation is create a business Bible almost with everything for your business within it. And then you can essentially just drop the book or email this file over, and then you don't need to worry. You just say, like, read these pages or these sections, or just email the sections you need from that. And then like Harry said, it's just essentially here's a step-by-step guide. A monkey could do it. If you've got some skill, for example, closing on the phone, that's obviously then ideal for a closer. But overall, it makes the system and the switch more seamless, especially for like the client side as well. Okay, so the next part then, what are our main goals slash what were they and how have they kind of developed over the duration of our businesses?
I'll let you go first. I started the last one.
Okay, awesome. So I kind of have two main goals for my business. And the first one I will kind of start because it's quite simple is just a financial goal. And that is kind of as simple as that. You should have a financial goal, a very specific financial goal for your business. Um, this doesn't necessarily mean this is your reason why, but if you don't have a financial goal, you won't hit one essentially. So my initial financial goal was to earn £1 million by that's earnings revenue by the 1st of July this year. That was my initial goal when I first started my business. Now, nothing wrong with that goal at all, but there wasn't really any base for it. I didn't sit and calculate that figure. I just kind of said, oh, a million, there you go. But because there was kind of no real thought process behind that figure specifically, it kind of made it difficult for me to actually want to achieve it. Whereas now, I've actually sat and worked out what I want to be able to buy with that money or want to be able to afford. So now the figure is 3.9k a month. So it's not like I could, because with a million as well, I could theoretically close one deal for £1 million once on one day and then take the rest of the year off. But I don't want to do that. I want to be able to generate recurring revenue. So at this point, it's 3.9k a month by July this year, and this is calculated. I have a spreadsheet that I can send you if you're interested. Just sort of let me know. And this literally, you put in the expenses that you want, whether it's team members. I've got holidays on there. I have martial arts lessons that I want to take, driving lessons, and it all put it all in there, and then it puts that figure at the end, and then that is what you need to make per month, and it also shows you per week or per day. I forget which one that you should be making, and because it's more specific to what I want, I see that as much more realistic, but realistic in terms of it's real in my mind, not realistic in terms of can I achieve it? Because realistically, you can achieve anything you want as long as you put the work in, essentially, and have that plan. And then in terms of my wider goal, the thing that actually kind of motivates me, it's a case of I want to be able to, first of all, build reputation and status for myself. That is kind of the big selfish reason for me. And equally, I want to help others do the same because whenever I have done that in the past, and this kind of delving into my psychology, whenever I've helped somebody build status or build reputation in the past, the response I get from them and I mean, even when I don't get a response, the feeling I get when I help them do that massively, it just makes me feel, well, it makes appeal to my status. It makes me feel like a king. So I kind of, me doing that and in my own personal life before this, it kind of helped me understand, right, well, what's the best way I can do that with as many people as possible. Now, to be fair, the two best options were either what Harry is doing, which is obviously like dating coaching, mindset coaching, relationship coaching, or marketing to help the business side. And as I kind of touched on in my origin story as such, it just kind of drew, like the marketing side kind of drew me in more than the dating coaching side at that point. So yeah, that's kind of it for me, Harry.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my goal and my motivation is very, very simple, and it's just impact. I think there's a real, genuine um, problem. Isn't even the right word. I think there's a pandemic, there's an epidemic of confidence, of social anxiety, of depression, of just people with a terrible mindset that's just plaguing their existence. I think there are serious and growing issues in terms of relationships. The divorce rate's increasing. The number of the suspected adultery rates seem to be going up. People unhappy in relationships seems to be going up. Suicides going up. All these kind of problems. And I think the simple answer is what impacts me is I want the world to be better in 20 years than it is now. And I want to make sure that I'm a force helping achieve that, quite simply. I mean, I focus very much on seeing my responsibility as making the world as good a place as possible for the next generation. Um, and that might be selfish because I have a child already and my son is part of that next generation. But plain and simply, I want the relationships between men and women, the relationships between employees and employers, the relationship between businesses and consumers, and just the relationships between people in general to be better and to fix some of the problems that we're noticing and people are, I think, aware of, even if they can't quite articulate what they are. So my business model was very, very simple, which is, from a practical standpoint, it needs to make money. Because if it makes no money and I'm just giving everything away for free, then A, nobody listens to it, because if you don't have any investment and you haven't had to pay and you haven't had to invest and you haven't had to kind of fight to get the product, then you have no respect for it, and therefore you're just going to kind of ignore the advice. It's why you kind of shouldn't give your friends free advice, because we all know your friends are just going to ignore you. Um, it's that simple. People don't respect information they're given for free. So I just from a practical standpoint, to make people actually shut the fuck up and listen to what I have to say, there has to be a form of payment involved. And secondly, if I gave everything away for free, then I'd end up in a situation where I have bills to pay. I have a child and a fiance to support, etc. And that wouldn't make any sense if I was doing all this for free, helping everybody else, but my family would suffer as a result. And I'd then need to go and get a 9 to 5 job, or I'd have to go back to sales, or go back to nightclub promotion, or going back to running companies or whatever. And I don't think any of that makes sense. So it's a question of, is there a financial motivation? Yes, because I'd need to keep the lights on and pay for a lifestyle that me and my fiance, my son want to have. And the more money I have, the more money I can donate to certain causes, the more money I can use to subsidize products to other people, the more money I can use to influence um, maybe other companies or maybe even politicians to go a certain way in terms of helping these problems. But the big motivating factor for me is I want 2 million success stories by the year 2050. I have just under 30 years, I have 29 years. I want 2 million people to be able to honestly, hand on heart, say, whether it was watching a YouTube video or attending some of the seminars I've got lined up in a couple of years' time, or whether it's one-to-one coaching, or whether it's reading my book, or whatever, listening to the podcast, or whatever the fuck it may be in terms of the medium. I want them to be able to say, I heard your advice, I implemented it, and it did genuinely help me. And if people are better off as a result of that, that is what I'm striving for. Plain and simple.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. It's definitely. Do I don't believe that money is the main goal is going to keep you motivated, going to keep you driven throughout the duration of your business. So you need that higher focus, which you obviously have in the form of impact. I have it in the form of building status and reputation for people. So it's kind of find what it is that genuinely, like, be honest with yourself to the person asking this question. Money, it's important to have a money goal. Like Harry said, you need to be able to feed the family, keep the lights on and fuel the life you want, but you need to have that deeper motivation. You need to understand why you're doing something. And I mean, to be fair, money may be the answer for that for some people, but for most people, it's not. So you kind of need to be honest with yourself on that.
Yeah, the question I always kind of ask people, um, with private clients, when we talk about motivation and how they can kind of get out of a rut, for example, when they feel like they're just not motivated to do anything, is very simply, if you had £1 million appear in your bank account every single day for the rest of your life, so money is never an issue, it's never going to be an issue, what the fuck would you want to do with your time? Whatever that is, go do it. And if you can find a way to monetize that as well, so it takes care of that financial burden, even better. So for some people, I've got one client who just, his answer is, I would just go for walks in nature. And it's like, awesome. That's what you need to do now. Go for a walk in nature, whether it's every day, once a week, once a month, whenever. You decide. But is there a way to kind of monetize it? Well, you could start on Instagram and you could start taking photos when you're on these nature walks, and you could kind of almost create almost like a travel blog almost.
Yeah.
Or you could go down different routes like that. Or you could have your 9-to-5 job and money's not the motivator for you. And you could just say, I'm really at peace when I go on a nice long hike, say in a national park or something. And it's a question of whatever it is that motivates you. Put money to one side. What motivates you? For some people, it's competition. They want to compete. Well, yeah. Great. There are lots of jobs that are competitive where will take care of finance and competition in equal measure.
Yeah.
If it has nothing to do with that, and you want to help people, then maybe something like being a volunteer or going into something like nursing or into being working in a care home or becoming a teacher or anything like that. There's always a way to fulfill these kind of things. Yeah. So ask yourself, if money was not an issue and I had a magic genie with infinite money, what would I spend my time doing? And do that.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. It's if you whatever you decide you would choose to spend your time doing, if it can be monetized, fantastic. Go do that and monetize it. If you're struggling to find a way to monetize it, then in the short term, start a business that you are good at and can monetize, make money, automate it, and then spend your time doing what you enjoy. And if you can make money from it or little money from it, it's not a problem because you've got this automated business that is purely there to generate you money. It's not something you're necessarily passionate about, so that you then have the time to spend on your passion, basically. Okay, cool. Next part of the question then. How can we make connections with other people? So I'm going to assume you're talking primarily about customers, but for the context of this question, we will also talk about other people in your industry, maybe mentors to sort of learn from. So Harry, do you want to shoot with that?
Yeah, well, I'll focus on networking within the industry and you tackle customers, because the marketing, that is all customers and that is all you, that's your expertise. But in terms of networking within the industry, when you start a business, one of the first things you need to be doing is market research. And you need to know who are the big players in your industry. How do you have a USP or a niche that sets you apart from them? And you need to be doing kind of research like that. Who are the kind of customers you want? What's the kind of the common occurrence in terms of spending habits? Are you selling a product? Say, for example, you're bringing a new car to the market. Well, cars are not something you're going to get a monthly payment from people for. People buy a car once every, I don't know, let's say, for example, it's 5 years. I don't know what the statistics are. But you could create monthly revenue by, for example, doing like a hire purchase scheme where people pay off the payment of the car in installments. So it's all about identifying, doing that market research beforehand. And then when you know who the players are, when you say, for example, you're starting your own car company, you know the big players are, for example, Volkswagen, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, Tesla, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Range Rover, etc. It then becomes a question of, right, who are the big players within those companies, right? That these people, identify them. Where do they tend to go? What do these people have in common? Do they tend to go to certain conferences? Do they tend to do this? Do they tend to do this, etc.? And then go to those places. If it's a conference, buy a ticket, attend, start talking. If it's more a case of you don't want to be talking to the big boys or the big players in the industry, and it's more, say something like, say, dating coaching, where we don't particularly have big players. There are people out there with a bigger name recognition, but most dating coaches, I'd say about 85-90% of so-called dating experts out there are kind of on the same level. And I don't mean in terms of quality of content, I mean in terms of just they're making about the same amount of money, they have about the same number of clients, etc. A lot of them, you'll notice, have similar interests. So it's almost impossible to be a dating coach and not be interested in psychology. So you'll most likely find people like, say, for example, me, at some kind of psychology conference or a talk by a specific psychologist on kind of, say, in the environmental psychology of dating, or something like that. Figure out what the interests of people are, go to them. Other than that, you can literally DM people. And people always feel weird about this, and why would I DM somebody who's professional or somebody who's bigger than me or higher up than me? But the example I'd use is, I think it was last week's podcast. Jordan got Ron Mora on the podcast. Yeah. And Ron is quite literally one of Jordan's mentors. And it was a simpler case of us DMing him and saying, hi, do you mind being on this podcast? And he responded, I think he even said it in the podcast himself, he really wants to give back and help kind of grow kind of young entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, that would kind of be my advice. If you're looking to network within the industry, come with a giving hand and say, look, there's a lot I can learn from you, but first, before you teach me anything, is there a problem I can help you with? Because it may be you've identified, say, for example, as dating coach, and you may have identified that I don't have a LinkedIn account, or I don't have a website that's up to date yet. And you could come and say, oh, by the way, I think your website's a bit terrible. Here's how I change it. I've just kind of made a kind of an example for you. What do you think? By the way, do you mind if I then take you for a coffee and we can kind of talk through and I can get some experience from you and find a mentor that way? That's always how I do it. Don't go to a mentor asking for anything. Don't go with your hands out going, please, can I take some value from you? Go saying, I can identify that you have a problem. Here's how I'd fix it. Can I help you out? And then they'll reciprocate by helping you out.
Yeah, 100%.
Anything you would add?
The only other thing I would kind of touch on is, I mean, actually, I'll share kind of my own experience with the exact thing you've just talked about. The other day, actually, I messaged I won't mention him by name, but a guy in my industry. He's probably about 10 years ahead of me in terms of size, scale, money, etc., success. And basically, I had a very specific question about running paid ads through Facebook Ads Manager, and I didn't know the answer, and I asked a couple of people and they didn't know the answer, and I Googled it and couldn't really find the answer. So then I basically went to this guy who I knew was very experienced with paid advertising on LinkedIn, and I basically said, like, hey, is there anything I can do to help you in return for? And then I was very clear about, in return for me helping you out with this small thing, whatever it might be, could you answer this question? And it's exactly like Harry said. I basically literally just said, how can I help you? And they got back to me and basically said, yes, actually, my LinkedIn bio has been just empty for, well, since he's had the account. Could you write me a short bio? And then I'll answer your question, no problem. So that's what I did. It took me 2 minutes, 3 minutes to write him a quick bio. Does the job, has the call to action, etc., etc. We can do another episode on that. And then, yeah, he just answered my question and I was able to solve the problem within 10 minutes as opposed to potentially months of testing or research. And it's that simple.
So in terms of the networking side of customers, take it away.
Yeah. So customers are actually very, very similar to how you would network with anyone, be it a mentor, a romantic partner, a friend. It doesn't really matter. It's all kind of very similar. But especially with clients, you first of all, to repeat what Harry's kind of just said, you want to go value first. Give value in advance. And therefore that kind of, not only does it kind of help build up that reciprocation between you and the customer or prospect, but it also helps you build authority because you've given them value in advance. They're getting those quick wins, those big results without even needing to pay you. And then it kind of puts the question in their head of, well, what if I do pay you? What can I get then? And then that's kind of a really great way to sort of start relationships. In terms of specifically how to find your target customers, though, First thing you need to do is build your customer avatar, and you need to understand exactly who they are, which means what platforms they use, what types of language they use, what they do and don't respond to, as in what are their pain points, what are their dreams, what is in their way. All of these things you need to be able to answer, and you need to be able to answer specifically for two reasons. Number one is content. Create all of your content with that specific target customer in mind. If you don't, it won't resonate. And that's the simplest answer for that. When I created my customer avatar and was very specific about it, my content engagement and my conversion rate improved massively, purely because I was tailoring all of my content to a very specific person that I had in mind. Now, when I say specific person, I don't mean, I don't know, John Doe who runs a luxury brand in this specific industry. It just means this type of person, just to clarify. The other reason why that's super useful is because at the end of the day, client acquisition is all about finding the right people and then opening up the relationship with them and then gradually moving them towards the sale in its simplest form anyway, whether that's over message, over the phone. So if you know all of the answers to these questions about your customer, you can be super, super specific and also then critical about whether this person is right for you. So you come across an account on Instagram or find an account on Instagram, and it looks like this person meets all of the criteria for your dream customer, then you can send them a message and basically, like Harry said, give value in advance or pay them a genuine compliment about their feed and then essentially start the relationship. And the important thing is don't sell in your first message. Now, you definitely can get some success from it, but I'm a big fan of not cold messaging. Or if you're going to cold message or cold close, don't just straight out the bat say, "Oh, hey, do you want to buy from me?" Because it won't work at least most of the time. You're much better off, even if you are going to cold message, cold close, cold sell in general, just start the conversation off with something that, first of all, is a pattern break. So it just almost throws them off guard because they don't expect you to ask that. One that I've found that works really well, especially on LinkedIn, where it's such a serious professional platform. I just message potential customers and basically say, "Hey, have you ever watched this film?" And they're just like, "Oh yeah, I've watched that film, really enjoyed it." And then it's started that conversation, and then you can suddenly you can start moving it and say, "Oh yeah, I've been following you for a while. What do you do in your business?" And then they start to reveal, "Well, I'm in this business. I've had these problems." And then you're kind of getting all the answers you need to then offer the solution. But yeah, no, I find that it really, really works. Just starting off with something casual at the end of the day, have you seen this film? What did you think of this? And then moving it that way. So the first step, definitely understand who you're actually talking to. Otherwise, you'll be talking to nobody. And then through your content, which is almost like the public fishing net, and then in your private messages, your private calls, which is almost like spear fishing, going down those two avenues to then get your dream customers, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to tag on to that really quickly, I want to be very clear when Jordan says about saying to them, "Oh, have you seen this movie?" or "What do you do?" and having a kind of a casual conversation that's nothing to do with work. That's not in a manipulative way. That is asking questions and giving answers that are genuinely
Yeah,
true
yeah,
and what you is. So, for example, me talking to somebody about how amazing the ice hockey is wouldn't be congruent because I don't fucking understand ice hockey. But if I message somebody because I saw on their LinkedIn they made a comment about Leicester Tigers Rugby Club, and I DM'd them, we started having a conversation about that and about how the season's going. That is genuinely congruent because that
yeah,
is the kind of conversation that I would have with a friend. It is a conversation that interests me, and I'm not putting on a persona or faking anything. It's a genuine
yeah,
interest.
yeah,
And the
yeah,
only other thing I wanted to add as well was when Jordan says content, I don't want you to be in your head going, "Well, I have a restaurant, so we don't produce content." Yes, you fucking do. You can still have an Instagram. You can still have an Instagram with photographs of your food, of your menu, of of all kinds of different things, the special offers you're doing. If you're whether you're a bar or a restaurant, anything, there is really no business in the world that can't have some form of social media and some form of content they're putting out there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's all about tailoring that content, like Jordan was saying. So if you want to know, for example, say it's a restaurant and you know that your average customer comes in at between 6 and 8 p.m. on weekdays, and they spend between, say, 35 and 50 pounds. And that's because they have a starter, main course, and a dessert, and they have 2 drinks of their meal. And you know that's what the average person has, for example. You don't then go down the route of being on the social media showing how fancy and exclusive and kind of posh you are, because that's not going to resonate with the scene, the demographic you have. And equally, if you're seen as a very kind of, you only get kind of professionals in and people dress up to attend, and you have to book and reserve days in advance, and you have no hope of ever getting a reservation at 6 p.m. If you're that kind of restaurant, then again, you want to play up that exclusivity and not have a content or captions or a kind of message that comes across as, oh, we're all inclusive, come here, we're your local friendly pub, because, or we're your local restaurant, because that's not what you are, and that's not the USP, that's not what you're selling to the customer when they are willing to spend this extra money on you and on your food. It's not just the quality of the food, it's this image that they're buying into, what it makes them feel about themselves. So there's always content to be produced, and all of that comes down to, like Jordan said, knowing the avatar, which is this kind of archetype of all of your customers combined into one based on the averages, and knowing exactly who they are, exactly what motivates them, and exactly why they buy from you and nobody else.
Yeah, no, definitely. To kind of summarize what Harry's just said, authenticity is key in everything. Because best case, and this is the best case, your prospects or even your mentors or your network will figure out that you're being inauthentic, and then they won't want anything to do with you. And that is the best case. Worst case, you actually get this customer or this client and they're talking to you about, let's say, ice hockey all the time, thinking, okay, well, you love ice hockey. And then you are stuck in this almost endless cycle of resentment towards the customer that's paying you, which makes no sense at all. So be authentic in every situation as much as you possibly can. And that is kind of the best kind of route, because at the end of the day, the customers I enjoy working with the most. Don't know about you, Harry, but for me, it's the customers that have shared interests, so it's we're doing the work, but at the same time, if I wanted to, I could have an enjoyable conversation with them about cigars or even gaming, like whatever it is. If we share, it's not essential, but if we share interests, I tend to enjoy the conversations a bit more because it is almost like talking to a friend.
Mm.
Okay, cool. So in that case, we go on to the next part of this question. If you could focus on those first few days, the ones where you literally got out of bed and started making your dream a reality, what did you do? So I know we kind of touched on our like origin of our business, but specifically on literally the first few days where we were getting these businesses up and running, what did we do and why did we do them?
Okay, well, I'll start. Very, very first thing when I actually decided to make it a proper business, and I'm using the second example we used earlier of how my business started, the second formation, the second pathway, and the second rendition of Regal Confidence, as it's now become known. First few days was simple. It was make a list of all the topics that I think people want to hear about. So it was how to get out of the friend zone, what are good IOIs, indicators of interest that women show. So how do you know when to start talking to a woman, or how do you know what the biological and psychological signs are to escalate? What is I made a list of about 15 things, and I'll be fair, I can't actually remember what most of them were anymore. But I made this long list of 15 things that I thought customers or potential customers wanted to learn about. And then I went and found customers and said, look, this is totally for free. I'm not charging you. Of these 15, can you rank them for me and tell me which one you care about most, what's the biggest issue you have, and what's the least biggest issue, and which would you be most willing to pay for advice on versus least willing to pay for advice on? And I just repeated that and duplicated it several times. I'll be honest, I was absolutely blatantly cheating when it comes to finding these potential customers, because I went on to the social media account of the biggest the biggest shark in this industry's ocean. And I just went on to his followers and I just DM'd them all with a copy and paste message basically saying, hey, out of interest, there are these questions. Which do you think is the biggest issue that you're facing personally? Which is causing the biggest amount of pain? And which would you be most willing to kind of remunerate me for fixing? So I compiled this list of, right, the market's told me this is the product I need to be starting with because this is where the pain point actually is. From then it was, okay, figuring out the actual strategy. So this is how I'm going to deliver the information. So is it going to be me coaching again, which isn't scalable? Or is it going to be, I'm going to record videos and send them out to people? Or am I going to write books, etc.? It was specifically working down what the product actually was. And then from then it was, right, now let's get into the marketing side so I can bring in customers to actually get the product to them. And finally, after I'd started getting customers who were ready to pay, again, this isn't the right way to do it. But that's when I then set up the actual methods. So I created PayPal accounts and legally registered the business and created business accounts and went through all the kind of the taxes and set up an accountant and kind of did all this stuff. Then created the website and everything like that. So the first kind of 5 days was very much, first 2 days was pure, let's research the market from the customer standpoint. Day 3 was get the product ready, figure out what the product's going to be, get it ready. And then 4, 5 is kind of the behind the scenes admin stuff that every single person who's an entrepreneur has had to do, but none of us like talking about because it's fucking boring. Staying on hold for like 3 hours with HMRC so you can register your companies for VAT and things like that. It is just a ball ache, is the simple answer.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how
Absolutely.
I started. How about for you?
For me, it was, so as I kind of said, we kind of had calls over a few kind of days that kind of got me tuned into maybe I should start a business. And essentially, my first steps were, first of all, deciding the product. What exactly did I want to sell? What was I good at? At the very, very beginning of Regal marketing, it was pure copywriting because that is what I had 3 years of experience in. I was only kind of just getting into the wider marketing world, whereas now that's obviously kind of developed as I've become much, much more experienced with that. So yeah, it started off with what am I selling? Now, obviously, it wasn't a product for me; it was a service. Then it was, who do I want to sell this to? Basically, who is my target customer? Figuring that out. And then it was kind of the very basic setup. So, you've got the setup that Harry talked about. You've got which social media platforms do I want to be on? Stuff as simple as that. It's setting up the website, getting things down like the name. And I recommend spending as little time as you can on the name because at the end of the day, unless you have a truly abysmal name, it's not going to make or destroy your business, and it can always be changed. If you've registered your business, you can always just change the trading as name. Now, you don't necessarily want to change it all the time because that would then be confusing. But you get my point. It's a reversible decision. So get the name down, get the very basics down. I got the website built, albeit it was a crap website, but I had a website. I got the basics of social media set up, understood who my customers were, got my product down, understood my price point as well, because you need to understand what you're going to charge. And then it was essentially a case of just doing. So getting that all set up. And I got the very, very basic structure set up, as in I had a content schedule with some analytics. I had, again, an overall plan for my content and my social media and my blog and all of this sort of stuff. And the other big thing that I forgot to mention was I decided on why I'm doing this. Now, it's kind of difficult to make a decision here and now, right? This is why I'm doing this without kind of going through a process of learning, which I kind of learned later. And the important thing to understand with all of these, and I mean literally everything that I've just kind of talked about, is they've all developed over the course of my business. So I'm not on the same social media platforms now as I was then. I'm not even providing the same services as I am now as I was then. They've expanded massively as my interests and skills have grown. So it's kind of get those base decisions down. They will more than likely be the wrong decisions unless you've got a mentor kind of guiding you through it. And then you'll develop and grow and change them. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the important thing is, like I said, take that week, get those things set up, stuff that Harry's talked about, the things that I've talked about, get it all set up, get it ready to go, even if it's, the pre-alpha stage, even if it's crap or okay, as long as it's passable, and then start going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep developing, keep improving, keep testing. Because ideal world, like with a website, for example, my first website was awful, and I mean horrific. That has developed and grown over time to a point now where I'm happy with it. But equally, now that I'm able to spend more time getting money, I can then just pay a web developer to create a professional quality website. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for me to teach myself to develop a website. My time would be much better spent providing my services, acquiring clients at this point, creating content at this point. So that's kind of the big thing. It's just get the very basics down and then just start, and then you can develop as you go.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in on that, a great example of this is actually this podcast right here, which, sorry if I'm breaking the fourth wall, but to anybody listening, but this is recorded quite literally on Jordan's computer and my laptop. We're in separate buildings, actually currently in separate counties, recording this remotely. We're using the cameras that are built into the software, and I've got obviously AirPods in, and Jordan's got his headset on. The reason because we started this during lockdown. We weren't able to do the perfect system, which would be we go and get a studio together, we get sofas and nice chairs, we buy all the mics and all the cameras we need, we get a video editor in, we get an audiographer in, we get all these different people in, and that way we can sit and have the conversation like Joe Rogan, where we're talking like this off camera, and there's different camera angles and they all set up and it works really well. We could have waited, let's say, a year until COVID's out the way, and then we can spend some money, invest into it, and go that route. Or we could just shut the fuck up, stop making excuses, and make a decision. And we've started, and obviously it's not perfect. The camera quality isn't the best out there on YouTube, and the audio quality isn't the best out there on Anchor. We know. But the content's fucking good. You guys seem to be really enjoying this content. Therefore, it's worth it. We know the little changes we need to make, and we're making those. So, for example, there was a few DMs I got about the background I had before, which was in the spare bedroom. So we've moved that downstairs now. So now you get to see a bunch of Bix boxes and my sneak shaker and a wall and wet wipes. Do you know what I mean? Like you just figure out what the issues are as you go along. Don't try and work out what the problems are going to be in advance, because you might just spend time worrying about things that turn out nobody gives a flying fuck about. Absolutely. And you might miss the things that are serious problems that you only realize once you're in the weeds. So just kind of shut the fuck up. Stop making excuses and just jump in.
Absolutely. You're always going to make mistakes. There is no way that you can predict every single possible thing that will go right or wrong. Otherwise, if you could, you'd be a billionaire at the end of the day, because you know the future essentially. You're not going to be able to predict everything that goes wrong, so you might as well, like, there's most mistakes you can make, and most mistakes are reversible. Like, for example, Harry's background wouldn't necessarily say it's a mistake, it's just not the ideal background, but then we get feedback, we adjust, we improve, and then next month maybe Harry will be in his own office. Well, I know you're actually in your own office now, but maybe the office will be upgraded. Maybe you'll have a nice view of, I don't know, a beach or something next month. Who knows? And then in the future, we'll be in a studio, and it's kind of just incremental upgrades. And then the podcast a year from now is going to be 20, 30, 100 times better than it is now. And even at this point, it's fantastic. So, yeah, it's always growing, always improving. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on with that part?
Yeah, so just to kind of make this really concise and simple, start with the customer, figure out what they want, tailor your product to fit what they want and their needs, because it may be that there's other people out there in the market who have a bigger market share, bigger company, more money behind them, etc., better brand recognition, all these kind of things. But if there is a problem with their product and you can identify what the problem their product is, and you can bring out your product specifically that does the same job but without this drawback, you are going to smash it out the park. And most likely you're going to have the big boy come along and say, here is some money, we want to buy your company off you because you're causing too much of an issue in the market, which I've told you off air before, but I've got a friend who did a similar kind of thing with a dating app. So there's, I think as long as you start from the standpoint of customer, then product, and then after that you give up about excuses. So when you start producing content, record it on your fucking iPhone. It's not difficult. You don't need all the fancy shit and all the cameras. You don't need, well, I just need to save it £500 to get the special whatever camera to record this content so I can stick it on Instagram. Use your phone. Oh, but I don't have the correct mics. Use a pair of headphones or use the built-in microphone. Oh, I don't have the right website. Use Wix or use Your Best and Me at this, but there's multiple kind of website designers out there.
Yeah,
I'm not endorsing Wix because I don't use any of them, so I don't know. But there's places out there where you can get shit done simply and easily that essentially a trained monkey can be able to do it. Yeah. So you have no excuses not to be able to start now. The days of you needed 15 grand behind you before you could start a company, they're gone.
Yeah.
Because you don't need software engineers anymore. You have it. You don't need a camera anymore. You've got it. You don't need a microphone anymore. You've got it. Like simply put, if you are able to watch or listen to this podcast, you have the device available to you that can do 90% of the work. Now, it won't be the same quality, but start the business, get the money coming in, then upgrade. And maybe when COVID's over, you've been in a situation where you've realized, oh, we've got like 25 grand saved up between us due to this podcast. Now we can get a studio. Now we can get lights. Now we can get in an actual videographer and all these kind of setups.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of don't wait, because if we'd waited, for example, maybe somebody else would have started a podcast and all you guys would be watching them. You'd have brand loyalty to those guys. And then we would just be even further behind the 8 ball.
Exactly. 100%. And also to kind of expand on what you've just said as well, I kind of want to give 2 examples from my current situation / own life. And that is about excuses, is just don't make any bullshit excuses. So from my own life, first of all, I have shit internet right now. Like, it's horrifically bad. And yet I'm still recording this podcast. I still upload content 3 times a day to my feed anyway. And it's like, that's not an excuse. You may have crap internet. It's like, okay, put your 4G on and go to the park to upload your content. Go to an internet cafe if they're still open. I don't actually know. And upload your content there. Or
go somewhere with public Wi-Fi.
Go somewhere with public Wi-Fi.
Go to McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. Or do what I do and just pre-plan. So I just upload everything in advance and it's not a problem. But there's solutions. And another thing as well, for example, Clubhouse. I've recently been running Clubhouse rooms, really, really enjoying them. But here's the thing. I have an Android. I shouldn't be able to go on Clubhouse. How can I? I've actually stolen my partner's phone, / borrowed my partner's phone, just so I can set up an account on Clubhouse and run these rooms, just so I can share value with you guys. So there's really no excuse, to be honest with you. There's always a way around it. Now, short of you have like a terminal illness, fair enough. Like, there are not excuses, but there are reasons why maybe you can't do certain things. But for the most part, excuses are just that. They're excuses and you can overcome them. I know people that have run businesses without any limbs. I know people who have run businesses from a hospital bed. I'm not necessarily recommending you do these things, but there are people out there who, no matter what life throws at them, they just take it on the chin and they're like, okay, cool. How do we get around this? Let's get on with it.
Yeah, and I think that's actually the deciding factor as to whether or not you succeed in the game that is business and entrepreneurship, which is how willing are you to train that resilience muscle, and that outside of the box, you're going to find a way regardless muscle. Because, I mean, to use another example, one of my favorite books that I've read in the last decade is Man Up by Bedros Keuilian. We kind of mentioned it with the Ron podcast. And his very, very simply put, his backstory is moved from communist Armenia to the USA, not speaking a word of English, as a foreigner with no money and a huge, like a big family, all trapped living in kind of one bedroom and stuff, and having to fight to get anything. So poor he couldn't afford lice treatment, so they had to use stolen petrol or gasoline to wash his hair to kill the lice. He's able to turn that into I think it's in the hundreds of millions of dollar business franchise. Nine-figure franchise called Fit Body Bootcamp. He can do that in his second language, in a country where he didn't know the culture when he moved there. And then he started literally poorer than I'm not going to say all of you, but then the vast majority of you are right now.
Yeah.
So he didn't have 10 cents to put together to start the business. So he had to get up off his arse, work, save the money up, and then, right, okay, now I can afford the phone. So now I can start doing content or whatever it be.
Yeah.
And it's that
100%.
simple. There are struggles in life. Yeah, we all have them. No matter where you are, no matter what your upbringing, no matter what your situation is, there's shit in your life that's difficult. Or you need to find a way to overcome, or you need to decide, right, this is what beats me. I surrender, I quit. And it's your choice. No one's going to it's your life. So no one really cares either way. I'll be brutally honest with you. I personally don't care whether you guys succeed or fail. I'll be honest. But I would like all of you to succeed. But it comes down to, are you willing to make that tough choice? It's the same as the gym. We all know how to get a better body. We all know how to be healthier. We all know how to put on like 20 pounds of muscle, or we all know how to burn 30 pounds of fat. Are you willing to go to the gym or to go to the park and do that HIIT and do that weight training and eat clean to do it? If you don't want to, that's fine. It's your life. Do as you please. But you're not allowed to you're not allowed to say, well, this excuse is what held me back. Because sometimes, like Jordan said, there's genuine justifications. But 95% of the time, you just didn't have the resilience, you didn't have the drive, or you just weren't able to think your way out into finding a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of round off that point with a great quote from Bedros, is that he not only overcame all of those struggles that he went through, but he actually sees them as an advantage for him. He calls all of that his immigrant edge, which I love. I absolutely love that, because he argues that made him hungry. You know, that not just literally hungry, but it made him understand how hard life can be, and gave him that drive to never want to, not only for him to never be in that position again, but his parents, his siblings. I'm actually not sure if he has siblings, but his siblings, if he has any, and then ultimately his children and his future family. So he doesn't just not make excuses. He takes his excuses that he could have and says, right, this is what's going to fuel me. And that is really, really powerful. So find your immigrant edge and use that to drive you 100%.
Absolutely.
Okay. Last point then. I'm going to kind of ask you to... Yes, Harry, how can I help you?
Nothing.
I thought he's just showing off your brand new bottle. I know you're proud of it.
Yeah, I'm just happening by complete coincidence to be pointing out that I'm drinking Sneak right now, specifically Purple Storm. Great flavour, great drink, no sugar, really, really good product.
I meant to ask actually, because I've seen you drinking it, and I've been wanting to try Sneak for a long time. So, is it actually good? Like, is it?
Yeah, in fairness, I mean, I'm not going to go through the technical jargon because I don't know any of it, but I know there's no sugar in it. I know it's got your amino acids and your vitamins, and it's healthy and all that stuff. But quite literally, imagine in terms of caffeine, I think it's about the same amount of caffeine as 2 cans or 3 cans of energy drink. I might be wrong. Do your own research, go on their own website. But it feels like I've had like 10 in terms of I'm just so awake and so focused. And on top of that, there's no crash, there's no come down. It's just kind of, it just eases off slowly. It's not like, say, a kind of Red Bull where I'll be really, really hyper for 10 minutes. And then like an hour later, I'm there just sat in the chairs. barely able to keep myself awake. So it's a really good product. I recommend you try some.
Yeah, no, I will actually. I'll get some ordered, to be fair. I might have to recommend it for my partner as well, because she was literally just complaining last night, actually, because she had a coffee and then a couple of hours later, it's just caffeine crush. So, yeah, I'll check it out. Okay, cool. In that case, then we'll get on to the last part of the question. And for this, I'm going to set you a challenge, Harry. You can
Okay.
only answer this in one sentence.
Okay.
I'll do the same. Don't worry. I'm going to live up to my challenge. I just know that I will find this significantly easier because you love talking. I mean, so do I, but not as much as you. Okay, so simple question. How can everyone else start working on their dreams today? One sentence.
Right. For the purpose of me giving you one sentence, I'm going to assume the person already knows what their dream is. So it's not about finding your dream, it's how can you start working on your dream today, knowing what your dream is.
Yeah.
In one sentence, shut the fuck up, stop asking silly questions, stop making excuses, and start. Find somewhere and start.
Good. Okay, I'm proud of you for getting through that in one sentence. I was going to go down the route of just 2 words, but you've kind of covered it. So I'm going to go with, if you don't start working on your dreams ever or today, then nobody will. Nobody is going to work on them for you.
Yeah, I mean, to flesh out the answer just ever so slightly, it is one of those where, like Jordan said, no one's going to help you. There isn't a genie in the lamp. There isn't a fairy godparent. They're like, it doesn't exist. So the simple truth is, if you have a dream to be a chef or to have your own business or to be, say, I don't know, 12 years old and you want to be a star athlete or whatever it is, identify the steps you need to take roughly to get there and start taking those steps. So if it's you want to be a chef, well, are you qualified? Are you a good cook? Do you have the legal qualifications necessary to work in a kitchen? Do you have experience? Identify what you need. Have you networked with those kind of people? Do you have a CV that makes people want to hire you? Could you perhaps go into these restaurants, the dream restaurant, say Gordon Ramsay's restaurant, and say, look, I don't have the experience, but I'd really like to work for you, even if it's just as a busboy or as a waiter or sommelier or whatever. It could be anything whatsoever. And it's specifically so I can see how these people work. So that's how you do it. Identify what you need to achieve your dream. Identify what's the first step you need to take, and no excuses, just go take that step. If we're wrong in our assumption and you don't know what your dream is, and it's about finding your dream, you don't find it, you build it.
Yeah.
It's kind of that simple. I mean, as we kind of talked about earlier, neither of us have the same goals that we set out originally with. Neither of us are doing what we thought we were going to be doing. If you asked me 5 years ago, would I be in this situation now? The answer would be absolutely not. If you asked me 3 years ago, I think the answer would still be no. So if you asked me a year ago, would I be doing it the way I'm doing it and have chosen to be doing it this way instead of other ways? The answer would definitely have been no. So you don't find a purpose, you don't find a passion, you don't find a goal. You go and do shit, realize that you enjoy this more than you enjoy this, or you enjoy this more than you thought you would, and you don't enjoy this as much, and you find things that you like. And from then, when you put devotion and you absolutely fucking go for it, you'll develop goals and you'll develop a passion and you'll develop a love for doing it. And then you are unstoppable because you have that internal motivation. But you can't wait around, meditate, and hope to find it. You have to go out and try shit. And if you don't know where's the starting point, the first thing that comes into your head when you close your eyes about what do you want from life, whatever that is, go do it.
Yeah.
And you may realize that was the worst idea ever and you hated it. Well, at least you've got one thing to cross off the list. That's not what your goal is. Go to the next thing and just keep going and going, and you will discover it.
Yeah,
You will
exactly.
build it. Sorry, you're not going to magically find it. You have to put the work in to kind of cultivate a dream and cultivate a passion, something.
Yeah, absolutely. From my own personal sort of journey, when I first started, I thought I knew what my goals, my reason why was, and I was working for a few months, and then I was just kind of getting burnt out, and that was partly because at that point I was struggling to get clients, and also because I didn't really understand why I was doing what I was doing, so it wasn't enough to keep me motivated when the business was hard without much reward. And then what I actually did is I took a week off, took a step back, and during that week I realized two key things. Number one, I was able to spend time thinking, reflecting more importantly on what I was doing up till that point, points that made me feel the best, that made me feel the most fulfilled, and the points that didn't. And that helped me come to a realization on, or it helped me get a big step closer towards what my reason why was. You know, it's still developed for me since then, but it helped me take a big step towards the right direction. And the second thing it made me realize is that I hate doing nothing, basically, because that week for me was a lot of chilling about, smoking cigars, going on games, doing very, very low thought, intensive tasks. Stuff that I enjoyed, but day one and two were fantastic. I was like, hell yeah, I can do what I want when I want. I don't have to worry about working at all, especially at that point because I was working 16-hour days. But after day two, it was kind of like, okay, well, now I want to do something. I forced myself not to, so I could essentially teach myself that lesson. And then by the end of the week, I had a much stronger reason why that could still be developed. And I understood that if I was to automate this business, me then going and chilling on a beach, doing nothing all day every day for more than 2 days just was not going to happen at all. So that kind of helped keep me driven to not only do work generally, but specifically do the work that I'm doing. Okay, fantastic. Well, that's everything for that question. I feel we've broken down each of the parts of that question fairly well and gone into a good amount of detail. Do you have anything that you wanted to kind of add, touch on, or respond to more, Harry?
No, just if we've misunderstood any of that question, obviously let us know,
Yeah,
and we'll happily
absolutely.
redo it again. And if anyone else has any questions similar to that one, this was a really, really good question. So if anyone else has got any questions, send them in. Like, we are happy, more than happy, to kind of work our way through them all one by one.
Absolutely, absolutely. We love answering your questions, Harry, so you can build that impact, and me, so I can help build that status and that prestige in your lives, and as well as my own for the selfish reasons. So, absolutely, send in any questions you have, even whether it's about this podcast or one of the like the past podcasts we've done, or even just a question we've never covered before, and you kind of want to have it answered on these episodes. And if you do have a question, as always, send us an email at theregalpodcast@gmail.com. That will be available in the description of these episodes / this episode. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the fantastic question. I've been Jordan Lewis. This has been Harry Cuttress. Have a great day.